Welcome back to Saxon Math. This is lesson 29 of course 1, multiplying fractions, reducing fractions by dividing by common factors. It's a new concept. So let's get right into it. There's about 17 problems to go through today, so don't fret. I'm going to go quickly and you will just need to rewind if you didn't get it the first time around. Below we have a shaded half of a circle. So this is a shaded half of a circle. So here you have half of a circle and half of that is shaded. Half of half. That's like 1/2 times 1/2. Most of us already know what that is. Half of a half is 1/4. If you multiply the numerators and the denominators, you get 1/4. We see that half of a half is 1/4. When we find half of a half, we are actually multiplying. Half of a half is half times half equaling a fourth. When we multiply fractions, we multiply the numerators to find the numerator of the product, and we multiply the denominators to find the denominator of the product. So the of in half refers to multiplication. So of means multiply. So multiply the numerator times the numerator and the denominator times the denominator. So for example, if you find a whole number, sometimes it says half of 4, for example. Well, that's the same as saying half of 4/1. So that's the same, and of means times. So then you just multiply the numerators and the denominators. In this case, you'd get 4/2, and that's the same as 4 divided by 2, which is the same as 2 in this case. So just keep in mind, if it's a whole number, it looks like this. You want to set it up as a fraction, improper fraction. So for example, another one, 2/3 of 4/5 means 2/3 times 4/5. And if you multiply the numerators, you get 8. Denominators, you get 15. These can't be reduced. This would be the final answer. Here's another example. If you have 4 times 2/3, that is the same as saying 4/1 times 2/3 equals 8/3, because 4 times 2 is 8, 1 times 3 is 3, and 8 divided by 3 is 2 with a remainder of 2, but instead of doing a remainder in this case, we do it as a numerator, and then this is the denominator, so 2 2/3. Don't forget to reduce fractions. You can find the number that will evenly divide both the numerator and the denominator. Being the greatest common factor means you would have to reduce it. So if it was 4/6 as a fraction, both 4 and 6 are divisible by the greatest common factor of 2. 4 divided by 2 is 2, 6 divided by 2 is 3. So the reduced fraction is 2/3, but it's actually an equivalent amount as 4/6. Okay, let's move on. So in example 1, what fraction is half of 3/4? So here's the picture of it. Here you have 3/4. That's what this representation is right here. This is 3/4 of the circle, and you have half of that 3/4. So if we were to take half of that 3/4, you can see that it splits right here. You can see now we have 2 halves of the 3/4. Okay, so you have, this is a half of this 3/4. This is all the way 3/4. This is 1/4 right here. And this piece from here around to here is 3/4. And if we're doing half of 3/4, you can do it as with the picture there probably. You can probably see what the answer is already. Or you can just multiply it. Numerators times the numerators is 3. Denominator times the denominator is 8. So it's 3/8. How can we see that in a picture? Well, if you look at the picture they have here, you can see that each one of these, then this would be 1/8 right here. And if you split a quarter into 8ths, you'd have another 1/8 here and another 1/8 here. So you can see that it's actually half of 3/4 is the same as 1, 2, 3/8. So there's the picture of it. This is what I would do mathematically. Just multiply the numerators and the denominators. So the word of again is multiplication, and you just multiply those out. You can find that 1/2 of 3/4 is 3/8. You can illustrate it on your fraction manipulatives by using 3/4 to make 3/4 of a circle and then covering half of that area with 3/8. And you can see clearly then that's what it would be. Let's go on to example 2. Multiply 3/4 times 2/3. So in this case, you just have to multiply the numerators times the numerators and the denominators times the denominators, and you get 6/12. But you have to recognize this. 6/12 can be reduced to 1/2. So if you're looking at this in this figure, you have a whole circle, that's one whole. But if it's 6 of those 12 equal parts, you can see that it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It also equals 1/2. So the best choice for an answer in this case would be 1/2. 6/12 is the answer, but it's better reduced to 1/2. Example 3. Multiply 4 times 2/3. Well, we've done this one before, so just keep in mind you multiply 4 times 2 and 1 times 3. Where'd the 1 come from? Well, that's because 4 is the same as 4/1. When you finish that, you can recognize that 8/3 can be reduced or changed into a mixed number by taking 8 divided by 3, and you get 2. This would be 6. 2 is the remainder, but instead we're going to use it as a numerator, and that'll be the denominator. 2 2/3 would be the best answer out of this. Example 4, 3 pennies are placed side by side as shown below. The diameter of one penny is 3/4 of an inch. How long is the row of pennies? So each one of these pennies is 3/4 of an inch. From there to there, all the way across, each penny is 3/4 of an inch. So your solution is simply, you could either add 3/4 plus 3/4 plus 3/4 equaling 9/4, and then reducing that, or you can multiply. And I personally would multiply and take 3/1 times 3/4. And why did I take 3/1? Because that's the same as 3. 3/1 is the same as 3 divided by 1, which equals 3. So 3 divided by 1 helps us understand we have to take 3 times 3 in the numerator to get 9, 1 times 4 in the denominator to get 4, and then we have to take 9 divided by 4 to get the mixed number answer. This would go in there 2 times. You get to 8. 1 would be the numerator, and 4 would be the denominator, and the label is inches. 2 1/4 inches from this point all the way to this point. That'd be, if we added 3/4 again, 3/4 again, it'd add up to 2 1/4 inches. All right, let's move on. Example 5. Sorry, we got a few things before that. We can reduce fractions by dividing the number and denominator by a factor of both numbers. To reduce 6/12, we will divide both the numerator and the denominator by 6. So for example, 6/12, you can divide it by 6 and 6. 6 divided by 6 is 1. 12 divided by 6 is 2. We divide both the numerator and the denominator by 6 because 6 is the largest or the greatest common factor of 6 and 12. If we had divided by 2 instead, we wouldn't have completely reduced the fraction. So if we did 6/12 and we divided this one by 2 and divided this one by 2, you'd end up with 3/6, which again is not reduced because then this one could be divisible by 3, this one could be divisible by 3, and that would be reduced finally. So this is just an equivalent fraction of it, of 6/12, and this is the reduced fraction that's in its lowest terms. So keep that in mind. It takes 2 or more steps sometimes to reduce fractions if we do not divide by the greatest common factor in the first step. So if you don't know it, it doesn't always hurt. You can still get there from not using greatest common factor. Example 5, so we're going to reduce 8/12. So we need to find the factors of 8. Factors of 8 are 1, 2, 4, and 8. The factors of 12 would be 1 and 12, 2 and 6, 3, and 4. Looks like the greatest common factor between the two is 8. So I'd want to take 8 divided by 4, 12 divided by 4, because 4 is the greatest common factor between 8 and 12. And I get 8, that'd be 2, this would be 3. So my reduced fraction would be 2/3. Okay, so if I chose incorrectly, if I accidentally chose 2 to divide, then I'd end up with 4/6. And if I would just have to then continue 4/6 divided by 2, and I could get 2/3 from there. So the best method might be to choose the greatest common factor, the GCF, equaling 4. Since we know that, we can start with that and only have to do it once. But if you do it twice, it doesn't really matter. You'll still get to the final answer, hopefully. Once you get to that point, you'll realize, oh, the greatest common factor between 2 and 3 is 1. And if I took this divided by 1 and this one divided by 1, I'd still end up with 2/3. So that's reduced. That's as far as it'll go. Example 6, multiply 2 times 5/12. Well, 2 is the same as 2 over 1, and I'm going to put 5 over 12. And one thing I like to do, and I'm gonna put this out there now because it'll help you in the future. But I noticed that this 12 and this 2, they're compatible with each other in that I can divide this one by 2 and get 1, and 12 divided by 2, I can get 6. So that would change this to now 1 times 5 and 1 times 6 in the denominator. So I'd end up with 5/6 as my answer. Now, if I didn't do that, it would just look like this. It'd be 2 over 1 times 5 over 12. I'd end up with 10 over 12, and that's okay. It's just I have to now reduce this. And then my factors of 10 are 1, 2, 5, and 10. The factors of 12 are 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, and 12. And I just recognize the greatest common factor between those is 2, actually. So then I'd have to divide this one by 2, I'd have to divide this one by 2, and I'd end up with 5/6 after all that hubbub. Or I could recognize this early on and see, oh yeah, 12 in the numerator over 12, or sorry, 2 in the numerator and 12 in the denominator would make 1/6. I can reduce that right there and then just have that numerator times that numerator, this numerator or denominator times this denominator. So that would be the final answer, 5/6. Example 7. There were 8 boys and 12 girls in the class. What is the ratio of boys to girls in the class? So it has to be in this order, boys to girls. It has to be reduced, I can see, because 8/12, both of these are divisible. This one's divisible by 4. This one's divisible by 4 as well. So because of that, I can recognize that 8 divided by 4 is 2, 12 divided by 4 is 3. And the ratio then is 2 to 3. And that's in the order of boys to girls. So it could have been 2 to 3 like this. It could have been 2 to 3 like that, or 2 to 3 in that order. All right, let's give a shot on some of these. We got letter A, half of 4/5. Remember, this means multiply. You should have answered 4/10, but then it should be reduced. Both of these are divisible by 2. This would be 2/5 is the final answer. Since 4 is divisible by 2, and 4 divided by 2 is 2, 10 divided by 2 is 5. Do letter B, 1/4 of 2/3. Should have been 2 over 12, but then you would recognize that 2 and 12 are compatible and that they're both divisible by 2. 2 divided by 2 is 1. 12 divided by 2 is 6. So I'd have 1/6. Do letter C, 2/3 times 3/4. This one you should recognize that it's 6 over 12, and then that reduces to 1/2. So 1/2 would be your final answer, because 6 divided by 6 is 1, 12 divided by 6 is 2. All right, multiply, then convert each answer from an improper fraction to a whole number or a mixed number. So 5/6 times 5/6. Should recognize that this is 30 over 30, which is reduced to 1 because 30 divided by 30 is 1. Letter E, 5 times 2/3. Should recognize that that's 5 times 2 in the numerators, and that'd be 10, and 1 times 3 in the denominator would be 10 over 3, and then I need to take 10 divided by 3, which is 3, which will get me to 9. 1 is the numerator, 3 is the denominator. So I'd have 3 and 1/3. And letter F, 2 times 4/3. Should recognize that that's 8/3 because it's 8 in the numerators and 3 in the denominator, and that reduces because I need to take 8 divided by 3, which is 2, gets me to 6. 2 would be the numerator, 3 would be the denominator. This would be 2 and 2/3. All right, let's try letter G here, reduce of each of these fractions. So you should have had, in this case, you recognize that they're both divisible by 3. 12 divided by 3 and 9 divided by 3. So this would end up being 3/4 as a reduced fraction. Letter H, 6/10. Both of these are reduced. They're both divisible by 2, it looks like. So if that's the greatest common factor, I would get 3 in the numerator here, and this would be 5 in this one. So it'd be 3/5. And letter I, looks like both of these are divisible by 3. I'm not sure if that's the greatest common factor yet, but this one would be 6 here, and this one would be 8. And I recognize, nope, that was not the greatest common factor, so I'm going to continue on. I'm going to divide this one by 2 because it's also, this one is divisible by 2, and I'd end up with 3 here, and this would be 4. So the reduced fraction of 18/24 would actually be 3/4. Okay, and letter J, in a class of 30, there were 20 girls. What's the ratio of boys to girls? So in that case, I need to have that in that order. I know how many girls there are already. There's 20. But I have to keep in mind, I don't know how many boys there are. I have to take that 30 minus the 20. I know that's 10. So that means there had to have been 10 boys and 20 girls. The ratio is 10 to 20, but reduced is 1 to 2. So that's the same as saying 10 over 20. And both of these are divisible by 10. The greatest common factor between those two is 10. That would make 1 to 2, or 1 to 2, or 1 to 2. All those would be correct for letter J. All right. Hope you learned something. If you didn't, go back and review it. And we'll see you tomorrow. Don't forget to do your questions 1 through 30 in written practice during class. We have 50-minute periods, and you can check your work. Have a great night.